We have about 1 minute until showtime. Watching the chat room, welcoming people in. Watching the chat. Okay, we should be good. Bring the studio in about 30 seconds. Good to see you, William. Yes, the chat room loves William. Lot going on. We have a lot to go over. Here we go.
To bring an open, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission.
Is it disloyalty? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not give that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started? Be they a government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
First hour, here we go. Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. We're streaming live through the America Free Radio studios on Revolution Radio, the number one listener-supported radio program in America. Go to revolutionradio.com or freedomslips.com and make a regular donation. Become a Patreon. Help us support the word, the revolution. This is where the past meets the future. In here, the results are always positive. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us. Already have the chat room open. Lots of people in. It's going to be a hot Wednesday night. William was first in. Good to see you out there, my friend. Agatha Velvet, good to see you out there. Laughter Man. Mark Hovsepian. Let's see. Mariposa Effect. Trucker Will, welcome back. Ruthie, you're new from YouTube. Hola to you. And Hardwick, Big D 1955. We have a couple of listeners on D Live out there. Most people are on YouTube. Baba Susie, good to see you out there. Danny, good to see you. And Agatha, it's always good to see you there. All right, let's get right to it. We have a lot to go over. I'm going to go over a little piece of history because it's not near and dear to my heart, but you know I did my postgraduate work at Oak Ridge, and I was into nuclear chemistry at the time. Thought it would make a good career. Ended up going another way with it. But a lot of people don't know that there were actually 3 weapons. Yes, the third weapon ended up being called the Demon Core. And the scientists that worked with it ended up being its victims. It was August 13th, 1945, and the Demon Core was poised, waiting to be unleashed onto a stunned Japan, still reeling in fresh chaos from the deadliest attacks anyone had ever seen. A week earlier, Little Boy had detonated over Hiroshima, followed by Batman in Nagasaki. These were the first and hopefully the only nuclear bombs ever used in warfare, claiming as many as 200,000 lives. And if things had turned out a little differently, a third deadly strike would have followed in their hellish wake. But history had other plans. After Nagasaki proved Hiroshima was not a fluke, that we could do it twice in a row, Japan promptly surrendered on August 15th, with Japanese radio broadcasting a recorded speech of Emperor Hirohito conceding to the Allies' demands. Now, the odd thing about this is most people in Japan had never heard the Emperor's voice before. It was the first time ever. And, of course, the first time they hear it, he's surrendering. But for scientists at the Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico, also known as Project Y, the event had a more pressing significance. It meant the functional heart of the third atom bomb. They'd been working on a 6.2 kilogram sphere of refined plutonium and gallium. It wasn't going to be needed for a war effort after all. If the conflict had still been raging, as it had for almost 5 straight years, this plutonium core would have been fitted into a second Fat Man assembly and detonated above another unsuspecting Japanese city just 4 days later. As it was, fate issued those souls a reprieve, and the Los Alamos device, codenamed Rufus at this point, would be retained at the facility for further testing. It was during these tests that the leftover nuke, which ultimately became known as the Demon Core, earned its name. The first accident with this core happened less than a week after Japan's surrender and only 2 days after the date of the Demon Core's canceled bombing run. The mission may have never launched, but the Demon Core, stranded at Los Alamos, still found an opportunity to kill. The Los Alamos scientists knew well the risks of what they were doing when they conducted criticality experiments with it, a means of measuring the threshold at which the plutonium would become in a state we call supercritical. That is to say, it's going to explode. So the point at which it would unleash explosively all of its radiation. The trick performed by scientists in the Manhattan Project, of which the Los Alamos lab was a part, was finding just how far you could go before that dangerous reaction was triggered. They even had an informal nickname for the high-risk experiments, one which hinted at the perils of what they did. They called it tickling the dragon's tail, knowing that if they had the misfortune to rouse the angry beast, they would be burned. To give you an idea, if my memory serves me correct, in the early days of the Trinity bomb, the Manhattan Project, they used lead rods sunk into the containment tube, soak up the extra neutrons to keep them from driving the core to criticality. The only way to lower the rods, because they were lead, was with a pulley system. And the pulley system was manual. Yeah, they actually, used a rope hand over hand and would pull the lead rods out of the core. And then they would tie it off on the handrail above the containment. So if it started to get too critical, too hot, looked like it was going to maybe launch a bunch of hydrogen gas and maybe blow the lid off, they would lower the lead rods back down in. And just to give you an idea how quickly they had to lower the rods, it wasn't hand over hand. They had to drop them in. So one of the guys stood at the ready with an axe to cut the rope so that you didn't have to go hand over hand with. So the lead rods would, by weight, just pull themselves and drop into the containment. And there was another reactor out there. This is why actually Dr. Enzor, who was our proctor in the nuclear chemistry lab at Tennessee Tech, was on the NRC team that went to Chernobyl to find out what happened. Chernobyl was just such an experiment. They pulled the rods, let the containment get near criticality, and then they would lower the rods into place. And they had practiced it a few times on day shift. Well, Siberia stretches over, 9 time zones? So by the time the government leadership got out there, they didn't want to spend the night in Chernobyl. So they had the night shift, the second shift, perform the experiment. They'd done it a number of times on day shift. It went without a hitch. It shouldn't be any problem. The experiment was to simulate a cooling pump failure, so that if there was a cooling pump failure, the residual electricity being generated by the generator would be enough to lower the lead rods into place. They didn't have pulleys. They had what are called EM drives, or EM electromagnetic screws that would drive the lead rods in. And the idea was that the generator spinning down would still have enough voltage to it, enough generating power to drive the actuators to lower the rods into place. And this was going to be witnessed by government officials. So what happened was, second shift didn't exactly know what they were doing. And what happened was, the reactor went critical. It heated up very quickly. The lead melted to the bearings and the rods could not drop into the containment to catch the extra neutrons. So what happened is it produced a hydrogen bubble above the reactor, which exploded. And when it exploded, because this was a carbon pile reactor, it blew the graphite lid off the reactor, and everything went critical, and it began to melt down. Of course, they flew in helicopters to drop sand, and they brought in firefighting crews to shoot it with foam, and it melted through the bottom of the reactor and significant distance into the ground. All the firefighters died. All of the emergency and first responder people died. All the people on that shift died. And then the NRC went in afterwards to see what happened, and that's the story as it goes. So they learned this through painful experience from this incident that I'm explaining to you. So at Los Alamos, physicist Harry Daghlian, and I know this type of scientist. I've worked with them before. He wants to prove his technology. He doesn't want to wait for anybody else to show up. So on the night of August 21st, 1945, Daghlian returned to the lab after dinner to try out his idea alone, with no other scientist, just a security guard around, which was a complete breach of safety protocols. Now, as Daghlian worked, he surrounded the plutonium sphere with bricks made of tungsten carbide, which reflected neutrons shed by the core back at the core, edging it closer and closer to criticality. Brick by brick, Daghlian built up these reflective walls around the core until his neutron monitoring equipment indicated the plutonium was about to go supercritical if he placed any more. Every neutron trying to escape into the containment lead was instead being fed back into the decay. Now, I've worked with guys like this before in the lab. They're smart. They really are. But they're clumsy and dangerous in the lab. True to form, he moved to pull one of the bricks away. And, tungsten carbide is a little heavy, right? It's not very easy. It's like picking up a brick of gold. And he went to move one of the bricks away to slow down the reaction, but in doing so, he accidentally dropped it directly on top of the sphere, inducing supercriticality and generating a glow of blue light and a wave of heat. Now, Daghlian reached out immediately and removed the brick, noticing a tingling sensation in his hand as he did so, and unfortunately, it was already too late for him. In that brief instant, he received a lethal dose of radiation. His burnt, irradiated hand blistered over, and he eventually fell into a coma after weeks of nausea and pain. He was dead just 25 days after the accident. The security guard on duty also received a non-lethal dose of radiation, but the demon core was not finished yet. Despite a review of safety procedures after Daghlian's death, any changes made weren't enough to prevent a similar accident occurring the following year. I'll throw you a picture of this just to show you what this looked like. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Let's see. My mouse to behave. All right. This is a picture of the 1945 Demon Core. And now I'm going to explain to you what they tried to do on May 21st, 1946. One of Daghlian's colleagues, physicist Louis Slotin, was demonstrating a similar criticality experiment. This time he was lowering a beryllium dome over the core instead of stacking reflective bricks around the core. And like the tungsten carbide bricks before it, the beryllium core reflected neutrons back at the core, pushing it toward criticality. Now Slotin, he was careful to ensure that the dome, which he called a tamper, never completely covered the core, using a screwdriver to maintain a small gap. It looked a little bit like this. I'm going to show you this picture here. This is a reenactment, but this is how they were leaving the core open. Now, this small gap was a crucial valve to enable enough of the neutrons to escape, but that little crack was enough to prevent the core from going critical. But you know the nature of screwdrivers, right? Of course, the screwdriver slipped and the dome dropped just for an instant, fully covering the demon core in a beryllium bubble, bouncing too many neutrons back at it. Another scientist in the room, Raymer Schreiber, turned around at the sound of the dome dropping, clunk, feeling heat and seeing a blue flash as the demon core went supercritical for the second time in the space of a year. The blue flash was clearly visible in the room, although the room was well illuminated from the windows and possibly the overhead lights. Schreiber later wrote in a report, the total duration of the flash could not have been more than a few tenths of a second. Slotin reacted very quickly in flipping the tamper piece off. Slotin may have been quick in rectifying his deadly mistake, but again, the damage was already done. He and 7 others in the room, including a photographer and a security guard, were all exposed to a burst of radiation. Although Slotin was the only one to receive a lethal dose, and a greater one than that inflicted on Dalian. After an initial bout of nausea and vomiting, he at first seemed to recover in the hospital, but within a few days was losing weight, experiencing abdominal pain, and began showing signs of mental confusion. A press release issued by Los Alamos at the time described his condition as three-dimensional sunburn. 9 days after the screwdriver slipped, he was gone. The 2 deadly accidents, only months apart, finally saw real changes take place at Los Alamos. New protocols meant an end to hands-on criticality experiments with scientists forced to use remote machinery to manipulate radioactive cores at a distance of hundreds of meters. They also stopped calling the plutonium core Rufus. From then on, it was simply known as the Demon Core. But after everything that had happened, the leftover nuke's time was up as well. Following the Slotin accident and the core's resultant increase in radiation levels, plans to use it in Operation Crossroads, the first post-war nuclear explosion demonstration to commence at Bikini Atoll a month later, were shelved. Instead, the plutonium was melted down and reintegrated into the U.S. nuclear stockpile to be recast into other cores as necessary. For the second and last time, the Demon Core was denied its detonation. Now, while the deaths of the 2 scientists can't be compared to the untold horrors if that Demon Core had actually been used in a 3rd nuclear attack against Japan, it's also easy to understand why the scientists gave it to the superstitious name they did. When they were working on it, they thought that, they were healthy, they were quick, they were smart, and they didn't really realize how high-energy neutrons would affect the human body. Of course, they tested it a bunch of times after that. One of the experiments was out there on one of the atolls, and what they did is they anchored barges every 100 yards away from the atoll for about a mile. And then they placed a ship out about 6 miles from the atoll. And when they blew the bomb off, what they were trying to determine, of course, because pigs placed on these barges have very similar physiology to humans, basically each barge was a corral of pigs floating at sea, and they were going to be irradiated once the bomb went off. Of course, the idea is that they would collect the pigs and do autopsies on them and, just see what radiation does when it blows off. Now, witnesses say aboard this ship that they were told not to look at the flash. Of course, some of them wore real dark sunglasses because they were witnesses of the flash. But they said that when that bomb went off, you could hear thousands of pigs squealing for their lives as the neutrons claimed them, one barge after another. Like how Dalian and Slotin weren't just killed by similar accidents involving the same plutonium core, both incidents took place on Tuesdays, on the 21st day of the month, and the men even passed away in the same hospital room. Of course, those aren't just coincidences. The demon core wasn't actually demonic. If there's an evil presence here, it isn't the core, but the fact that humans rushed to make these terrible weapons in the first place and then actually be insane enough to use them. And the real horror, besides the horrible effects of radiation poisoning, is how spectacularly mid-20th century scientists failed to protect themselves from the extreme dangers that they were toying with, despite fully knowing the grave risks in their midst. Now, according to Schreiber, Slotin's first words immediately after the screwdriver incident were simple and already resigned. He had confronted his dying friend Dalian in the hospital, and he knew what came next. He said, "Well, that does it." Now, I've worked in nuclear labs many times, and plutonium is considered the most poisonous substance on the planet. And it is so easy. It is so easy. You wear a dosimeter, and you have all these protocols and gloves, and you have a SCBM, that's a self-contained breathing apparatus, and you take every precaution. You work with stuff in a hood, and the hood has lead mesh going up to the ceiling so it can absorb any stray neutrons that might flow out in the airflow. And you think, that you can skip some step, that you can get the lab done quickly. You can run the experiments over and over again. And then you have your dosimeter checked every single day. It's checked. And when you see a few scintillations on that dosimeter, a scintillation means an incident of collision with an energetic neutron, or an X-ray, or a gamma ray. When you see an incident of collision on your dosimeter that you're wearing on your lapel, it's a wake-up call. It's not, any more than a X-ray at a dentist office. But the fact that you didn't do it intentionally, something that you did in that lab exposed you to gamma radiation or to an energetic neutron. And when we were doing neutron activation spectroscopy, yeah, I know that's a lot to say. Basically, you could take any metal, and I think at the time I took my class ring, I put it in the spectrometer, bombarded it with neutrons from a californium source. Californium is a daughter of uranium in the nuclide chart. But we had a californium source, and we would vacuum it over into the chamber, rotate it, expose it to the californium for a few minutes or a few seconds. I can't remember exactly the amount of time, but it was not like hours. Rotate it back over, vacuum it over into what's called the decay chamber. And that's kind of remarkable, this decay chamber, because in this particular lab, that decay chamber was made from a sawed-off section of a 19-inch gun from a World War I ship, a Navy ship. And what was remarkable about it was that the comment from the lab instructor. He said it was atomically quiet metal. And I asked him, what does that mean, atomically quiet? He said, well, this gun barrel was made out of iron that was smelted, steel that was made before the first atomic explosion, before Trinity. He said every bit of iron smelted since then has a slight amount of radioactivity to it, so it's not atomically quiet. If you put the detector inside that chamber, it would detect nothing because that iron was quiet. But if you made it from a modern gun barrel or recycled car parts or whatever and made that chamber today, that chamber would be slightly radioactive. Now, that's not to say that it's dangerous, but the fact that it has any scintillations at all means it's so profound how much we changed the planet by blowing off over 2,600 of these things around the planet and in space and underwater and in the air and underground. 2,600 of these warheads. That's how many experiments have been done. That's how we've changed planet Earth for thousands of years. It has changed. So when the ring got back over to the scintillation and the neutrons come off because they've been stuck to copper and stuck to gold, which is what my class ring was made of, they assume the release energy. So they're stuck to that nucleus of that atom. And when they come off, because they're extra neutrons, they don't belong on the copper, they don't belong on the gold. So the atom is going to try to get itself to ground state by kicking off these energetic neutrons. Well, when they come off, they have sort of what we call the heat of activation. Trying not to make it too complicated for you, but it's basically the amount of energy that it takes to remove that neutron from that gold is identical to the weight of the gold. So therefore, when it comes off and we catch it in the detector, we could tell that it came off of gold. We could tell that it came off copper. And the reason that we did that is because I wanted to verify that my ring was in fact 14 karat gold. And it was. It was. My ring was exactly 14 karat gold. So much copper, so much gold. That's how you measure the purity of the gold, or the portion of the ring that is gold. And I thought that was interesting. I thought it was fascinating. Neutron activation spectroscopy. So that's it. In a nutshell, it was a great lab. But the most profound thing about that lab that day was learning about atomically quiet metal. Yes, rough draught, that's an interesting point. Demons, you say. Swine, you say. Where have I heard this before? Yes, exactly. Well, the fact that Jesus called out legion and cast them into the bodies of swine, and then the pigs decided that, they were being driven mad by the evil that Jesus had placed in them, and they promptly ran off the cliff and killed themselves rather than bear that evil even for 1 second. So interesting that they call it the demon core. And I appreciate all you Earth explorers being out there in the chat room. This is a Wednesday night, so this is a 2-hour program. We don't have any. We have a break at the top of the hour, and that's it. We don't have any guests tonight. Well, last week we tried to have Dustin Nemos on, and the reason that I wanted to bring Dustin on was because he is considering running for public office. And I'm not going to tell you what the office is right now because I don't want to alert anybody. I want to marshal any armies against him just yet. But I always encourage people, especially young people with great hair, because it takes good hair to run for a public office, I have determined. That's why I never ran for public office, to be honest with you. And I think when you have a good mind and you're quick on your feet and you're well informed, you make a good representative of the people, and you should go into government. Now, a lot of people say, I really don't like politics. I hate politics. In fact, I've been in big meetings before and people have stood up and walked out because we were talking about politics. But the truth is that politics is actually quite beautiful. Politics is really the mechanism of religion. It always has been. It is politics is a representative speech. So what you're actually trying to do is debate or to represent your community or the majority of the community or the majority of your voters in a political body where you have discussion. Of course, where there's discussion, there's argument, there's disagreement, and what we're really sick of, I guess, is the compromise. And I don't mean compromise, two people coming together and saying, I want the fence here, no, I want the fence there. Well, how about if we split the difference and put the fence here? That's a compromise. I mean the compromise where people like Chief Justice Roberts being invited to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophilia island and possibly drinking a little too much wine, eventually falling asleep in the luxurious accommodations at the island, and while he is asleep, wine-induced or not, some underage girls are brought in, scantily clad or naked, photographed or videoed on the bed with the Chief Justice, and when he wakes up, he is now owned by the global syndicate. This was Jeffrey Epstein's main job. And Ghislaine Maxwell, who's in jail right now without bond, who I believe this month she is going to be arraigned and she's going to start her trial. She has not been out on bond because she was a flight risk. She was actually a recruiter of the girls. Now, you would think, well, who would do that? Well, listen to me, how easy this is, all right? You find a middle class or even better, working poor family that has a talented young girl, 12, 13, 14 years old. By talented, I mean sexually attractive. And you meet with the parents or the parent. Sometimes they don't have two parents, most of the time, I guess. And you say, look, I am a high fashion person, and I think your daughter really has talent. And I think we would like to do a photo shoot. And if you would accept, $2,500 as an initial offer to let your daughter come and take some photographs with our professionals, we think she may have a career. And so the photographs go well. The businessmen or the politicians or the judges or the generals like the pictures that they see. And so they extend an invitation for her to come and model at the island. And so this time the girl is offered clothing and jewelry and makeup and a professional hair treatments and a plane ticket to go meet with rich and powerful people. And I can tell you, I've seen these mothers before. Now, I never allowed my daughter to participate in beauty pageants per se, but there were people in my extended family who thought it was a big deal. And one of them did have a very beautiful daughter. And from the age of five, this girl was in beauty pageants, one after the other, and she was a knockout, and she won lots of trophies. Now, did the daughter really like it? Well, yes. I mean, it was dress up, but it was the mother. It was the mother that was driven to it. And the mothers competed against one another. I'm sure you've seen the TV shows, but it's real. It's real. The mothers are just as jealous and just as protective and just as supportive of their daughter's modeling career as they can be. And when someone like Ghislaine Maxwell shows up and starts throwing around $1,000 here, $100 there, free plane tickets, jewelry, clothing, magazine shoots, it goes a long way to making these mothers turn their daughters over for a couple of weeks or a summer. Now, just to give you a little refresher, you remember the college entrance scam. You remember that? Where the actress let their daughter, who was, I think, 17 years old, go on a summer sailing ship with the rowing coach. Yeah. And I'm sure that all the clothes that she wore that summer on that boat, all of them could fit in a lunchbox together, all the clothes. And believe it or not, that was the second summer. So she went when she was 16 and she went when she was 17. And sure enough, she got on the rowing team, even though the hardest thing she ever held in her hands was a curling iron, and had no muscle tone whatsoever. But, she could be on injured reserve, and adding her to the rowing team meant that she could get admitted to a prestigious college. Was she particularly smart? Did she have the grades? No. Primarily, she was going for two things: the sheepskin, which is what they used to put diplomas on, and possibly an MRS degree. MRS means Mrs. So maybe what she was trying to do is find herself a prep-schooled lawyer or a prep-schooled banker or, someone like that, a corporate climber to whom they could be married, especially in the movie industry or real estate or something like that. And that way they could have a rich lifestyle like Mommy had because Mommy looked good on TV or in the movies. Well, they got busted. But the point is that these mothers do let their daughters go on these junkets, and they do let them spend time with older, fat men with money because they know that's the secret to success. If you have the talent. If you have the talent. And by talent, I mean you have the sexual attraction. And that's why there's so much attention into sexualizing these young kids and making it acceptable in society so that these girls can be, quote, successful. And, so when I say politics is a beautiful process, I don't mean the compromise where these politicians are blackmailed. You receive money from the Communist Chinese Party, or you receive money from some lobbyist at Raytheon or some lobbyist at Pfizer or Monsanto. And then when that bill comes up, the one that affects Monsanto's business, that affects the approval of a drug through the FDA for the big pharma, or it affects the movement of a large real estate transaction or the easement for a freeway or a pipeline, you have to vote the way they tell you to vote because you're compromised. You're bought, you're paid for, you're blackmailed. Those pictures will make their way to the New York Times and your career will be over. So I'm not saying that all 9 justices are that way. You don't have to do that to all 9 Supreme Court justices. You only have to do it to the Chief Justice because he's the guy that says which cases they take and which cases they don't. It's not like you have 8 justices who are free thinkers and are independent authorities. They have to do pretty much what the Chief Justice tells them to do as far as the activities of the court. And that makes politics nasty and makes it evil. And what we like to see is men of good integrity, who usually come from boys of good integrity, to go to Washington and represent us. Unfortunately, that is not what happens. And it's just as bad on the state level, and it's just as bad on the city level. If you go to your nearest big city and you go to a city council meeting, you're going to meet these guys. You're going to meet them in the city council meetings. You're going to meet them in the Chamber of Commerce meetings. And it's filthy. But that's why when we say all politics is local, this is what we mean. You should be going to your local city council meetings. You should. You should go to your local industrial board meetings, because then you get to meet the companies that are trying to come in. You'll know what's going on in your community. Now, you don't all have to go, but you should find citizen representatives among you and divide up the labor. They only meet once a week, right? Sometimes they meet once a week and then they have one big meeting once a month. Sometimes they only meet once a month. That's kind of part-time government, but believe it or not, that's how it's done. So you're only talking about maybe between 12 and 52 meetings a year. If you can't find 52 friends or 52 church members that will divide up the weeks and say, okay, I'll go this Tuesday, I'll go this Thursday, take the calendar, sign it out. Maybe some people can go to 2 meetings. But here's what happens if you don't go. If you don't go, that's the day that resolution gets passed. That's the day that law or that easement or that zoning change takes place. And once it takes place, you can't undo it. Oh, you can. I suppose that you could raise the money and go sue them and stop it. But don't you think it would be a lot easier to go to the meeting and raise your hand and say, excuse me, I have a question. Isn't it true that if we approve that farm for an industrial park, which we already have 2 industrial parks and they're pretty much empty, but isn't it true that if we approve that land, that zoning change, that your farm, which is across the street from it, will triple in value? You see, those are the kinds of questions you need to ask. That's why you need to be at the city council meeting. That's why. When you saw President Lyndon Johnson, when he became a president, he was close to bankruptcy. I mean, vice president doesn't really make a whole hill of beans. But what happened was, in Texas, they approved an airport. Yeah, they approved an airport. And it just so happened that that land that the airport needed was his. And he went from being almost penniless to be worth millions and millions of dollars once that approval happened. That's how it's done. When you see someone like Bernie Sanders, who is worthless, hasn't held a job in his entire life, he's a loudmouth Marxist. He was broke. Why do you think he dressed so drab? Because he was poor. But he wanted to be rich. He wanted the money. And in order to get the money, you have to do the favors, which Bernie Sanders was difficult to do because he was a Marxist. So they got with a ghostwriter who wrote a book, put his name on it. They published the book, and somebody ordered about 25 or 30,000 copies of that book. I never saw it for sale anywhere, but somebody bought it, which put it on the New York Times bestseller list. And, of course, Bernie put about a $2.5 million cool into his pocket from the sale of that book. Who bought it? Doesn't matter. In Washington, we call that money laundering. You're laundering money through the publisher to the author who didn't write the book in the first place. Everybody gets paid off. Bernie gets to buy another house and a Ferrari, and everybody's happy. You see, Bernie Sanders never wanted to be president. He only wanted to be rich. He's perfectly happy being a senator. It's way less work. Way less work. And once you have the money, well, then it's time to retire. And you saw a lot of them retire in the last 5 years. All right, let's go to the next story. How much time do we have in this hour? Oh, we're getting pretty close, about 13 minutes. All right. I want to talk about serial number 11. You know, serial number 11 is the Starship, right? The SpaceX Starship. When I say serial number 11, that's what I'm talking about, the stainless steel Starship. So 8 hit the ground a little hard and exploded. 9, similar. 10, yeah, same thing. Actually, it landed and behaved itself for about 2 minutes, and then it exploded. Well, we now know why SpaceX's latest Starship, serial number 11, went up in flames. The stainless steel vehicle launched on a test flight on March 30th from SpaceX's South Texas facility near the Gulf Coast village of Boca Chica. I'm going to go down there. What do you say? We'll go down there and do a live broadcast on one of the launches. You support it in the chat room. I'll haul my motorcycle down there, and we'll get through the fence somehow. We'll do it. Well, serial number 11 soared to a maximum altitude of 6.2 miles. That's about 10 kilometers, as planned. And the 165-foot tall craft checked a number of boxes on the way down as well. It did its horizontal maneuver. It did its vertical swing. But serial number 11 didn't stick that landing. Nope. Instead, it exploded in a massive fireball because of a plumbing problem. And that's what the cause was. Ascent phase, transition to horizontal and control during free fall were all good. A relatively small natural gas leak led to a fire on engine 2 and fried part of the avionics, causing hard start attempting landing burn in the methane turbopump. This is getting fixed 6 ways to Sunday. That's what Musk said via Twitter the next day. Methane is the propeller for SpaceX's powerful next-generation Raptor engine, and a hard start refers to ignition when there's too much fuel in the combustion chamber and the pressure is therefore too high, and that's not a good thing for any engine. Yeah, methane has the highest amount of available energy of the natural gases. Ethane, propane, butane, etc. They have less and less available energy as you add carbons to it. And we used to do methane injection, natural gas injection, on our natural trucks, on our diesel trucks. What you call it compressed natural gas, CNG. And it adds the horsepower. Wow. You feed that thing in prior to the turbocharger, it gets smashed into the combustion chamber along with the diesel fuel. And it's a ride, baby. It's like 600 horsepower right away. We like it. SpaceX is developing Starship to take people and cargo to the moon. I think maybe we need to stick one landing, at least one landing, before you put people in that ship. I would think at least one. What do you say? At least one. The transportation system consists of 2 elements, both of which are going to be fully reusable. The Starship spacecraft and a giant first-stage booster called Super Heavy. Both Starship and Super Heavy will be powered by Raptors, 6 for the final Starship and about 30 for the huge booster. Musk has said serial number 11 sported 3 Raptors, as did each of the 3 predecessors, 8, 9, and 10, which launched on a 6-mile-high test flight in December, February, and early March. All 4 flights were broadly similar, with the prototypes performing well, right up till the very end, where that, Mohammed meets the mountain. Not so good. SpaceX is going to keep trying to get the landing right. The company has already built the next Starship prototype, known as serial number 15, and it's going to fly. It'll fly pretty soon, and we'll watch it, and we will report on it because we're excited about it. We get Starship going and stick the landing a few times, and then it's off to the moon. Off to the moon. We stick the landing on the moon a couple times, launch back off the moon and return to Earth and land on the moon, on Earth again. Now you've got something really, really viable. Now, I don't think that we should, have to do that every single time. Sit on some kind of candle and, launch out to space and go 2 days to the moon and then, land on a candle and then do whatever venture we're going to do there. If we're going to dump off equipment or set off a 3D printer and build a structure or something on the moon, and then, jump on the candle and fly all the way back to Earth. Maybe what we should do is build the Gateway Project. The Gateway Project is a multifunctional, large space station. And then the idea is to take people from Earth to Gateway with one ship, and then go from Gateway to the moon with another ship, and be able to refuel that ship at Gateway in space. And I really think that the key to making deep space travel plausible is fusion rocketry. I just do. And the fusion rocketry has got to be helium-3. It's got to be helium-3 fusion. I know we haven't done it successfully here on Earth, but I think there are probably 2 obstacles to making it happen here on Earth. We've tried a tokamaks, we've tried stellariums, we've tried to build ITER. Now it's been building for 40 years, and we don't have it done yet, and I don't think it's ever going to be done because I think we're going to run out of money or resolve or something. We're going to say, you know what, we could just do green energy cheaper than we can do this thing. It's big. It's like a city of concrete that they're trying to put this together. And the reason is they're trying to overcome 2 things. One is the gravitational force of Earth, which makes it hard to contain the plasma. You have to contain the plasma and not let it touch the side of the reactor. And the other thing is the vacuum. You know, when you have a very large structure and you have to pull a vacuum on it, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of energy. It could take 2 or 3 weeks to get the last few air molecules out of that thing. On the moon, you don't have either of those things. You don't have a big gravitational pull, and you don't have any air. So the containment is a lot easier to do. And we should be able to do helium-3 in a bottle, the size of a minivan, instead of one the size of, New Jersey. Well, not New Jersey, but a stadium anyway. And I think it's more plausible. But once we get fusion drive, once we get a fusion rocket, where all we really have to do is feed it helium-3, and when it fuses, of course, it's going to create a tremendous amount of energy, and it's going to create energetic protons, and protons can be steered with electric grids, or they can be collected, and you can make electricity out of them. There's a lot of things you could do with energetic protons that you can't do with energetic neutrons, which would make it radioactive. And that's one of the nice things about helium-3. No radioactivity. No radioactivity. You don't have any high energy neutrons to worry about. And you can't do anything with them except collect them, in something dense like lead or tungsten. You can't steer them because they're neutral. They don't respond to electromagnetic charge. But protons do. You can drive them around with an electric grid. And you could also create much faster thrust. When we perfect the fusion drive, those Raptor engines, which currently use natural gas to fire, they would use helium-3. Of course, you could carry way more energy on the ship. You wouldn't have a compressed natural gas tank. You would have a supply of helium-3, which could last for years on a ship. And you would reduce the amount of time it takes to get from Earth to Mars, or from the moon to Mars, to about 70 days instead of 7 months. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away. More X Squared Radio coming at you right after this.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Be evasive.
But that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
There's Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. And there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came and also the daughters of men, indicating that there were giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I'm Steve Crawford, host of Factor Theory Live. Join me every Sunday night from 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Check it out.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right. Welcome back. Second hour of America Free Radio, streaming to you live, not just on YouTube, but also on Facebook, Twitch, DLive, and Twitter, and Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. It is time for us to give away some lemons in DLive. We have a lot of listeners in DLive tonight, So let's do it. What do you say? How about it? Here we go. We're going to distribute the rewards. And in about 30 seconds, we're going to know who the lucky winners are of our generous distribution of lemons to our faithful listeners in the D-Live community. If you're not a member of the D-Live community, that's okay. If you're listening on YouTube, that's fine. If you're listening on Twitch, we love you so much. Thank you so much. If you're listening on Facebook or Twitter, we love you as well. This is just a way of me being able to show my appreciation. So we have two winners tonight. Big D, 1955, gets 65.6 lemons. And what is that? Oh, Storms Up, 38.1. Very nice, very nice, very rich. This is good. This is good. So now you have real money. That's real cryptocurrency. My gift to you. Thank you so much for listening tonight on dlive.tv. If you want to follow me, it's easy to do. You go to dlive.tv/Brooks Agnew. I'll put the description right down here. And go there. It costs nothing to follow me. If you subscribe, it will cost you a little bit each month. DLive gets part of it. I get part of it. And it helps keep the lights on and take care of administrative things that we use for the program, and we make it go toward the North Pole Inner Earth expedition. You're very welcome, my friends. Thank you so much for being out there and listening. I'm glad, Dogstar. Dogstar says, I love Science Night. We'll get a bit of science every show, but a favorite segment for sure. Well, we have also a Ukraine update. I have, for about the last 3 weeks, been keeping you abreast on what's going on in Ukraine. It's important because there's so much disinformation out there, and there's so much alarmism, I'm going to call it, especially among the YouTubers. They're really, some of them get way out of hand. And I want you to keep this in mind when I share my analysis of what is going on in Ukraine. This standoff and some skirmishes have been going on since about 2012, and even earlier. There are three factions that are serious in Ukraine. There are the separatists, which are the allies of Russia inside Ukraine. They are Russians living in Ukraine, and more importantly, they are communists in the purest sense of politics. Okay, they don't want to take over the world. They just want to make their choice to live as communists. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. There are the Ukrainians, which may be tied to oligarchs who are very rich landowners and are the equivalent of warlords, in the sense that they have the hardware, they have the land, they have the mines, they have the forests, and they have tough fighters, and they've been holding onto their property for hundreds of years. Then there is NATO, which is the SS-style soldier, who they also employ Al-Qaeda to fight for them. Virtually nothing you hear or read in the press is trustworthy. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that. Especially if it comes from government sources. Don't listen to that crap, okay? They're just psyoping you. Some private sources are reliable, but they take a huge risk if they share video about locations or troop strength or movements. So with that in mind, let me clear your mind with this information, okay? The Ukrainian Defense Ministry's main intelligence directorate does not rule out that the enemy forces may try to go for an incursion and deploy their troops deeper into the territory of Ukraine. Again, this is a government source. We take it with a grain of salt. It may be totally false. According to intelligence reports, Russia is building up its military presence near, and the key word is near, the Ukrainian borders, and is completing the preparation of a set of measures aimed at forcing Ukraine into a military response. And that last part is probably not true. They're not trying to force a military response. What they're trying to do is to get NATO to back off. NATO has been moving steadily, equipment, rocket launchers, artillery, tanks, and soldiers, and forward listening posts closer and closer and closer to Russia. And they have even said in the press, and I will tell you right now that this is a lie. This is totally false. There's no truth to it whatsoever. Nobody in Ukraine is requesting NATO to send soldiers into Ukraine to defend them against Russia. They're not. That is totally false. The Kiev Post wrote, actually a week ago, that Ukrainian soldiers are holding the line amid Russian escalation and the coronavirus pandemic, while the Kremlin has massed troops along Ukraine's eastern borders for what it describes, and this is the key word here, it describes as routine military exercises. 2 more Ukrainian soldiers were killed this week in clashes with Russia-supported Donbass separatists. Now, this is in Donetsk, okay? So there are 2 states, Donetsk and Luhansk. They are separatists, which means if they had their druthers, they would leave Ukraine, the loose coalition of states there. These 2 states would leave and return to Russia, just like Crimea did, because the Crimeans are Russians. They speak Russian. They're Russian descendants and German, to tell you the truth. But they voted for it. They voted to be annexed. It was their choice. Nobody invaded them. Nobody broke any windows. Nobody fired a shot. Nothing. Not even military hardware had been there for years and years and years. Now, the Kremlin on Wednesday criticized Ukraine's appeal to join NATO, and rightly so, and said Russia will keep as many forces on the Ukrainian border as it sees fit. It's their property. They could do what they want. And if they want to put 53 brigades on the edge of the border, it should be no skin off anyone's nose. They're not going to invade Ukraine. What they are going to do is they're going to get mad as hell if NATO does. Russia's armed forces are on Russian territory in the places it considers necessary and appropriate, and they will stay there for as long as our military leadership and supreme commander consider it appropriate. And that's Dmitry Peskov. Separatist leaders in Donbass accused Ukraine of causing the conflict to escalate with the cynical shelling of our territory by Ukrainian armed units. And I didn't see the footage of the shells landing, but I did see the footage with the audio of the shells firing. You can tell the sound of a 105 when it fires. It has a particular sound. Now, I didn't hear the shell going through the air. Sometimes you can hear that thing ripping through the air. But if it's firing away from you, you're not going to hear it. It's only if the shell goes overhead you can hear the shell kind of ripping through the air. But you can tell when the howitzers are shooting and when the tanks are firing, and that's what was happening. So Kiev speaks about reaching peace via joining a military alliance, which is really an oxymoron. It's not going to happen. They're so different in ideologies. Ukraine is not going to make peace with anybody because inside Ukraine there are the separatists and the oligarchs are never going to let Russia in. It's their land, it's their mines, it's their forests. They're total, not just capitalists, they're like warlords. They own it, and they have owned it since, centuries they've owned it. They're like the old feudal lords. Needless to say that such calls to question Ukraine's already ragged reputation as a negotiating partner is kind of ridiculous. Natalia Nikonarova, who's the foreign minister of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, yes, they're self-proclaimed. They don't have a big army. All they're trying to do is defend their streets. And they've been doing it with light gunfire, we'll call light firearms. But when Al-Qaeda and NATO people bring in 50 calibers, or they bring in 20 millimeters, or even worse, 30 or 40 millimeters, then buildings start to fall down. And then it gets nasty, because now you have to go in with artillery or with demolitions, and you have to fight street to street, alley to alley. And we don't like to see that, because then what happens is the place turns into Damascus. Look, it's okay to go shoot AK-47s at one another. You can hear this, and the warlords will set up their turf, and the separatists will set up their turf, and that's it. Everybody works within that framework. It's kind of a standoff, a mutual agreement. But when they start bringing in the heavier stuff, then all bets are off. Ukrainian diplomat Leonid Kravchuk said Tuesday that he will never return to the city of Minsk in Belarus for further negotiations, and would quit his post if ordered to do so, because the Belarusian are aligned with Russia, as I have said, and have been making very ugly and obscene statements regarding Ukraine. Minsk was the venue for negotiations in 2014 and 15. You'll recall when Obama was president, and when Johns, McCain, and Kerry went there and fomented the riots to oust then President Viktor Yanukovych. And of course it didn't work. The riots went on, and nobody was paying any attention. It barely made it, below the fold, until Victoria Nuland went there, of course. Once Victoria Nuland went there, and she set up the U.S. Army snipers to work alongside the Ukrainian snipers, and they marched the protesters into the streets, covering their heads with a piece of tin. Then they just killed 100 of them in the streets. Now, once you get to that kind of body count, now you're talking something that gets international press. And this is what Obama wanted. This is why he sent Victoria Nuland into there, and why she did what she did. So we don't want to see that happen again. We don't want to see that happen. We don't want to see this escalated again. Of course, we don't have Johns, McCain, and Kerry over there stirring it up, but it wouldn't take much to get that going. Now, the Moscow Times worried this week that Ukraine and Russia are slowly sliding into war as the threadbare truce created by the Minsk Accords unravels completely. And they want it to unravel. They want it to go into conflict because they're trying to stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. In retaliation for Kiev's recent crackdown on pro-Russian media and politicians, Moscow is staging a large-scale and ostentatious military buildup along the Ukrainian border. When the separatists have their spokesman go to the news or go to the newspapers or go on the radio and they do their interviews, and we've had them on this program before, they talk about wanting to be free. They talk about wanting to have their own choice. And they don't want to be part of Ukraine. They want to be part of Russia, or at least they want to be communists, and they don't want to be a part of the EU and NATO. And so they're trying to maintain their independence and not go the way as the Ukraine is not really a country. It's more of a territory that is made up of several small states. Lithuania and Estonia, they've already separated. They have their own governments, their own parliaments, their own voting, their own access to the New York Stock Exchange. They've raised their own money. They become independent countries because they were once states inside the Soviet Union. Well, that's all broken up now, and all of the states have become independent and have become somewhat successful, except for Ukraine, because Ukraine is not a unified body. It is, at best, a loose coalition, and maybe it needs to divide down a little bit further. But amid this grim reality, the two countries claim that they are doing everything they can do to avoid war. And I think those claims ring hollow. I don't really think they're trying to avoid war, because if they were going to avoid war, the way to do it would be to surrender. And they're not going to surrender. So the fact that people say that they're trying to work toward peace doesn't really hold water, because they're not really working toward peace because one side is not willing to surrender, and that's the way it's going to happen, either through victory or through negotiations. Now, the Moscow Times gave Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is, I think, a good guy. He was a former comedian, but he's popular, he's smart, he's got a quick mind, he got along well with Donald Trump, and I think he was sincere about bringing peace to Ukraine. He doesn't want war. He's not a warlike president. He was elected in 2019, and he was upset about the corruption of Virtual Joe and all the money that he laundered through corrupt shell corporations and through Burisma, which was a very corrupt oligarch, organization of an oligarch that laundered $1 billion of U.S. taxpayer money and made a few people very freaking rich, including Virtual Joe and his family, and John Kerry and Victoria Nuland and others. They're all guilty as hell. And I think if Volodymyr could get some support from the Pentagon, I think he would indict them. I do. I think that his court, his attorney general, would indict Virtual Joe and Hunter Biden, would indict Victoria Nuland, and maybe even John Kerry, and certainly the Clintons, for what they did in Ukraine, because all that dirt and all that blood is on their hands. Now, in my analysis, Mr. Zelensky lost whatever maneuvering room he still had when the coronavirus pandemic, this made-for-TV virus, absolutely tanked the Ukrainian economy. You have to really think about the power that was unleashed on them and 186 other countries around the world, including the United States, to shut down their economies. For what? For what? For a flu that could be treated with a teaspoon of quinine water. A disease that 99.8% of the people walk away from it, especially young people. Now, people my age, when I had it, I could tell this thing was going right down in my lungs with both boots, and I was in for a fight. And one of my close friends said, look, this one, it responds to vitamin C. You need to do that. And I said, I've tried vitamin C before, and it doesn't really work. I don't know. I think I'm going down for the count here. And my friend said, no. I promise you do the vitamin C, this one responds. I said, okay. So I went to the pantry, pulled out the 1 gram horse tablets, and I wolfed a couple of them down. And literally within an hour, I started feeling better. So I said, wow, if 2 will do me good, 4 will do me better. So about 4 hours later, I popped another couple grams. Within 2 days, it made it so far down into my lungs, and I could start feeling the burn. I thought, this is going to be rough when my lungs fill up with fluid, and I'm prone to bronchitis. Anyway, it turned around and headed out. It was done. 3 days, it was history. I had no fever, no aches, no chills, no nothing. It was gone. I do know this. My body was flooded with antibodies. I kicked its ass. And that's why I'm immune to this day. I have not had a sniffle or a cough in 2 years since, in a year and a half since contracting that. And I think everyone could do that. This one responds to vitamins and prophylactics and treatments like ivermectin. And, of course, I use fenbendazole. It's a little cheaper and more available. But ivermectin you can get with a prescription. Your doctor will prescribe it. And you don't need the jab. You don't need the jab. Anyway, I digressed. I think the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is going to be completed. I think Russia and Germany are very excited about that. Instead of planning an invasion, I think Putin could be moving military hardware to the Ukrainian border to intimidate Volodymyr Zelensky and thwart his attempt to join NATO. And I think it's a smart idea. Keep NATO where it needs to be. Russia is not the Soviet Union. In my opinion, NATO, if it's going to fight anything, it needs to fight the terrorists that are quickly taking over the UK and France as we speak. If Zelensky will be fighting the oligarchs, who, by the way, have Virtual Joe over a barrel, they have the direct evidence of his crimes. And if Zelensky wanted, I tell you, he could indict him for corruption and money laundering and ask for him to be extradited to Ukraine to stand trial and be executed. Of course, that would not go well with D.C. He would likely get killed over it or run out of office like Yanukovych, but I think Zelensky should hold his ground. Now, let's see, a couple other things. The U.S. recently tested a hypersonic missile. They would drop it from a jet and watch it go. And this particular missile has an Aero booster on an ARRW booster. And it didn't deploy from the carrier plane as planned last Sunday. Some more work will be required to get the U.S. Air Force's new hypersonic weapon up to speed. I'm wondering, I think it would have been good to have a good test. I think it's bad to have a bad test. I don't know who's going to get court-martialed over it not working on the jet, but sometimes I wonder if it's a psyop, that actually it did work or could work, and they're just presenting a vulnerability, although I don't think that's a very smart idea. The system is known as the AGM-133 or 183A, and it is an air-launched, what we call a rapid response weapon. This means you don't have to launch it from the ground or a sub. You take it up in a jet. It's flying along at 500 knots, and you drop it, and off it goes. You bring the jets into the battlefield, and that battlefield can be a naval battlefield with ships deployed and enemy ships deployed, or it could be land targets that have anti-missile systems around them, like the Series 300 or Series 400 Russian anti-missile batteries. Now, the missile was supposed to do this launch during a powered test flight off the coast of Southern California, but the booster failed to deploy. This hypersonic vehicle travels at Mach 5. That's pretty close to 4,000 miles an hour. It's pretty dang quick. It's 5 times faster than the speed of sound. It's about 760 miles an hour is Mach 1, so 5 times that would be, pretty close to 5,000 miles an hour. And if it's heading downhill, like shooting down from the jet under the ground, it could probably reach 6,000 miles an hour, which is really, really hard to shoot down. Now, once the booster reaches such speeds, it'll deploy an unpowered but maneuverable, what's called the glide vehicle. Now, the glide vehicle is not powered, but it does have the ability to steer. And one missile could launch as many as, 6 or even 8 warheads. And these warheads in these glide vehicles can go to 8 different targets. And they can do a very, complex pattern as long as they're high altitude, traveling at that speed. They can be very, very difficult to shoot down. They don't have a thermal signature other than the friction of the air going around them. They don't have a rocket of their own. So very difficult to shoot down. Now, to date, the Air Force has conducted 7 of these rapid response weapons in captive carry flights. in which the B-52 intentionally held onto the missile from takeoff to touchdown. Sunday's trial was supposed to be the first powered test, and it didn't work. So Elon Musk is not the only one that has these high-speed tests. And, our enemies like Iran and China and Russia, they haven't tested that much either. We would have detected it. We would know about it. We could see it from space. But everybody has this risk when it comes to, say, a cruise missile that would normally fly along at about 350, 400 miles an hour, say 20 feet off the water. You wouldn't even see it until it was like 12 miles away. And in that last 12 miles, it could accelerate from 350 miles an hour to 3,000 miles an hour. Like, that rate of acceleration makes it very difficult to track. Just when you think you have the right lead on it, it accelerates and goes a little bit faster. Makes it very hard to take out. And if it's just 12 miles away, think about it for a second. It accelerates to 3,000 miles an hour. You know how long it takes to cover 12 miles at 3,000 miles an hour? Yeah, it doesn't take long. That's 5 miles a minute. 5 miles a minute. That's cooking. I'll see, 5 miles a minute would be 300 miles an hour. So it'd be 50 miles in a minute. So it could cross 12 miles in way less than a minute, which makes it, difficult to get your finger on the trigger. You better have your defense systems already set up and running, which is difficult to do. Can't leave that stuff running because, it's kind of like shields up. Your enemies know you're there. If your radar system is up and running, they can also use that to target you. All right, a little bit of politics to follow up. This will be amusing to you. It is to me. I'm not sure how true it is, but you know what? This is something we discussed on the program. I think it was just after January 6th, because, as you know, me and 500,000 of my friends went to Washington, D.C., and we were pretty serious about supporting the Republic, and we were also pretty sad that we could see that the global syndicate had worked their magic. They had run their cheap-by-mail business model, and it was successful. And so we lost the election, and we lost the Republic. But nearly every U.S. president before Donald Trump has held public office before their Oval Office tenure. Congressman or a senator or a governor, you know what I'm talking about. Not many senators, but a lot of governors. Many have been members of the Senate, and more than a dozen were governors. A few have held posts as Secretary of the Navy, CIA director, right? They've held office. And one even was on the Supreme Court after his presidency. But now, there's a suggestion that President Donald Trump, who never held office before the presidency, in 2 years could be Speaker of the House. Oh, yeah. Odds are increasing that Donald Trump could be the next Speaker of the House. He could have a major role in the coming 2022 congressional elections. I can tell you right now, if he goes out and he stumps for you, he comes to your state and he does a rally, you're going to win. And when you bring the money and you bring the win, you also get the gavel. That's the way it works. Okay? A GOP majority in the House in 2022 would absolutely elect Trump as Speaker of the House. House rules allow for the majority to select someone from the outside. He does not have to run for Congress. From outside to serve in the position. And what about former President Donald Trump? Aides said that he is focused on electing friendly Republicans in the 2022 election. And you know what? I'm going to be out there with him. And if it helps the GOP regain the majority, there is growing support for installing Trump as House Speaker. And it is allowed under the House rules. I'm serious. I am serious. I am going to be working on at least one campaign. I'm going to be writing speeches for a congressional candidate who's going to be running against an incumbent who will be running for his third term. He is a corrupt rhino, and we want to see him replaced. And I'm perfectly happy to write speeches for other candidates. I will tell you right now, I write the best 4 minutes in politics. Absolutely. Bar none. You want a speech, you contact me. I'll write you a speech, and it will get you elected. And I can write you a cadre of them, a quiver full of them, and you can memorize them and deploy them as needed in your debates and in your stump speeches. Trump, we know this. He is a disruptor, but he has a long-term vision. And I absolutely believe in the marrow of my bones that he could be the nominee in 2024. I know what happens to men as they get old. They begin repeating themselves. They begin drifting off in ignominy, and it could happen to Trump too. The presidency is a lot of stress. Although I have to say, Donald Trump looked better after 4 years than he did when he first came down the escalator. I swear he did. And I've been to rallies and I've listened to him speak, and you feel that energy. You see a man that can get up in front of people in the bitter cold wind or in the sweltering heat in a suit, never once wipe his face, never once clear his throat, never once cough, never once lean away from the microphone and cough. I've done it myself. I've done it on this program. But not Donald Trump. He's an amazingly strong individual. And when he speaks with power. And he speaks with authority. He's a boss. When he walked across that gravel of the demilitarized zone and shook hands with little Kim, he did it alone. That's a president. But you think the president is powerful. But as you've seen, a half-sober old biddy from California, former Miss Lubrack, 1959, slept with John F. Kennedy. That's her claim to fame. She's the most powerful woman in the world. Admittedly, she's inept. She's a drunk. She's got an ego, and she's a narcissist. We understand that. She doesn't have a plan for America. She has a plan for herself. But you could see what a powerful Speaker of the House can do. You watched what happened in 1994 when Clinton beat Daddy Bush in 92. He had his way. He had the House, he had the Senate, he had it all. But America had had enough of Bill Clinton by 1994. And when Newt Gingrich in 1993 began his campaign called Contract with America, and he nationalized his run, and he became Speaker of the House, I got to tell you, if it wasn't for that, Bill Clinton would have been a one-term president. The balancing of the budget, the criminal justice reform, and the welfare reform that were done under Newt Gingrich saved the Clinton presidency. The whole Clinton legacy exists because of Newt Gingrich. That's why they targeted him. That's why they spied on him. And they released an illegal recording of his wiretapped phone in order to make him step down. If Trump is appointed as Speaker of the House, and no, he does not have to be an elected congressman to do this, Congress could just get together and say, we want Trump to come into the House and be Speaker of the House. It would be worse for the Democrats with him as Speaker of the House than it is as with him as president. As president, he can sign executive orders, but as Speaker of the House, he controls the legislation. He controls the lawmaking, and he controls the agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations. You think it's the president, but it's not. It's the Speaker of the House. And I agree, Stephen. I could be elected the head of the Klingon Empire. I could be. Absolutely. I do speak some Klingon. All right, let's see. Let's go to the next story here. Yes. I was going to cover this. You bring in really good points in the chat room, and I have to tell you, I'm excited about what's coming up. I think. I have. Oh, I see it. I have 15 pages of notes tonight, and a lot of it has to do with this, because there's a lot of flack about this, and people are weighing in on it. But I think we're serious that Trump could become speaker. Steve Bannon, through his popular video podcast War Room, slightly more popular than America Free Radio, has contended that evidence of election fraud collected through hearings in 6 swing states and other investigations shows that Trump won the election. He argues that courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, did not address the evidence, instead dismissing the cases on procedural grounds such as standing and timing and stuff like that. Well, here's what we know. The cheat by mail process is a business model that worked for the Democrats. Winning is everything. So once they won, then they had the global media empire say, well, that's it then. The election's over, and any attempt to change anything is considered trying to overturn a duly elected president. But the election wasn't over yet. Anyway, all that's water under the bridge. It's too much water under the bridge. 72, 73 days later, and the country is hemorrhaging. We have high gas prices. Our taxes are going through the roof. People are pouring over our border. No country respects us because everybody knows Virtual Joe is compromised, that he is a unconvicted co-conspirator with money laundering of U.S. taxpayer money through Ukraine, and that his son is guilty of colluding with the Chinese to influence the election. And by the way, I am writing book number 12. I'm not going to give you the name of the book yet, but I will tell you it is a sequel to Charm of Favor. And 6 chapters are in the can and the prologue. And wow, is it shaping up to be a book. Holy crap. The stuff that I'm revealing in this book is going to freaking blow your mind. And, of course, it has the high espionage that you saw in Charm of Favor. And it goes way beyond that, way beyond that. We're not just talking a nuclear plot. This is a really real. Everything, of course, as you know, in Charm of Favor was real, and the names were kept the same because everybody's guilty. Steven says, gives a whole new meaning to Operation Warp Speed. Yeah, it does. I mean, do I believe in green energy? Sure, I do. Do I think that we should cut off our crutch of fossil fuels, what they call fossil fuels, oil and gas, and make the leap into green energy right now? No. Earth has given us a loan in the form of stored up energy in the form of oil and natural gas and coal. And it will last for a few hundred years. Once it's played out, you're going to have another source of energy. But that doesn't mean that you turn out the lights and jack everybody's gas prices to $10 a gallon so that you could pay for this new dream. You see, in order to do this, in order to make the jump to green energy, you're going to have to change the economy. I don't mean give everybody a living wage. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, you have to change the way the economy works. Right now, our economy works off dollars. It works off yuan. It works off rubles and yen and euros, right? So what we do is we do a little bit of work here, and we turn that into some agreement to pay, which we call dollars in this country. And then I can send those dollars to you basically in an envelope or in a bunch of ones and zeros because I put the value in the system here. And then you can exchange that because it's a promise to pay. You can exchange that for whatever it is you need on your end. So you sell me something that I buy, and then you take that and add that to your wealth. You put that into value in your situation. It has worked that way fine for thousands of years, but we're beyond that now. We don't need a way anymore. We don't need to have a system of exchange in between, and we don't need to have middlemen handling that system of exchange. In other words, we don't need anybody counterfeiting value in the system. That's basically the printing of money or the creation of bonds or any of that. We don't need any of that. There's more than enough value and to spare on the earth. And so as long as somebody can add value to the condition, to the human condition, they're not worthless. Now, am I saying that a person who can design a machine and do the machine work to create the components of that machine, assemble that machine, power it, program it, paint it, put it into place, and have it run, am I saying that that person has the same value as a part-time concrete poet and rock collector and out-of-tune vagabond singer, karaoke singer? No, I'm not saying they have the same value at all. Do I think that somebody should be able to join a community, an able-bodied person, and say, well, I don't really want to work and I don't want to learn anything. I don't want to have to take tests or study or actually do anything. But listen, dude, I need 3 meals a day and I got to get laid every now and then. And, I like to stay warm at night and out of the sun, during the day. And it would be nice if I had a computer to play video games on. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is you're going to, by those choices that you've made or refused to make, you've assigned yourself to living on the street. You're going to be a street urchin. And you know what? They are present on every world you go to. There are people, and you can go find them right now in Austin, Texas, and you can find them in Los Angeles, and you can find them in Portland and Seattle and Paris. They choose to live on the streets. They have made life choices. They want to live on the streets. They like showering at a drinking fountain. They enjoy being stoned whenever they get the chance. They enjoy trading sex for a hamburger. That's their lifestyle. They've chosen that lifestyle. And if you go to the streets of Los Angeles or the streets of Portland, you're going to find people that have made that choice in their lives. That's their chosen vocation. They're a vagabond. They are worse than a vagabond. They're not really a nomad. A nomad is a traveling trader, somebody that trades in skins or gold or rare earth metals or jewels or their labor of some kind. A nomad is not a vagabond. A vagabond is somebody that drifts around and cheats like a gypsy for everything that they get. And they feel that if somebody's not watching their wallet, it's their own damn fault. I want that wallet more than they do, and so I'm going to take it. I'm sorry. That's the kind of people you see them everywhere. I saw them in China. I saw them in Tibet. I saw them in Nepal. I've seen them in Mexico. I've seen them in San Francisco. People that just don't want to add value to the system. All they want to do is take what you have. Now, I don't think green energy is going to be the solution for them. Green energy right now is going to be very expensive because the sun doesn't deliver enough energy to the surface of our planet to be able to use for our electric lifestyle. A solar panel that will keep your phone charged at all times is way bigger than the phone. It's way bigger. The solar panel only collects maybe 15 to 19% of the energy that strikes it and converts it into electricity. That's not feasible. And when you consider that the chemistry, the tellurium and the silver and the the thing that makes up the prismatic cell of that solar panel. When you consider that in air or access to oxygen, the solar panel rots. It goes away. Every year it loses about 7 to 10% of its ability to convert sunlight into electricity, which means those solar panels that you put on the roof of your house, right now they might put out 2.5 kilowatts. In 10 years, they're not going to put out anything. So the companies that are going to be thriving in 5 years from now are the ones that are recycling solar panels. They're recycling the tellurium and the silver and the precious metals it takes to make solar panels work. They're going to recycle that. Is it going to be cheaper to recycle than it is to mine new minerals? I don't know. I don't know what the recycling process is on a solar panel. And I'll tell you another business that's going to be thriving. I don't invest in it because they don't exist yet on a large basis. Right now, I invest in lithium. I invest in the mines themselves because the lithium has to come from the mine, go to a battery fabrication plant, and be made into batteries. That's our process right now. That's how we store the electricity to use in electric vehicles and other components. Same with your cell phone, same with your computer, same with your car, or if you have an electric airplane. But what happens in 8 years? What happens in 8 years when that battery pack is a boat anchor? Well, it's still loaded with lithium. It's still loaded with cobalt. But you got to strip the plastic off of it. You got to get the powdered component, the actual electrolyte, out of it. Then you have to chemically separate that out and reprocess it and make another battery from it. That technology doesn't exist on an industrial scale yet. All those Tesla batteries that are out there right now, I know this is going to drive you mad. It's all headed for the landfill. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I bought about $200,000 worth of lithium batteries in my life. And you know what I did with them when they wore out? I threw them away because there was nobody to recycle them. You can't take them to AutoZone or O'Reilly's or someplace like that and recycle those batteries. You just toss them in the landfill. They're gone. I used them up. I tested them. I ran them. I raced them. I overcharged them, undercharged them, wore them out, and I threw them away. $200,000 worth of lithium. There is no recycling business. You think I'm going to store it until there is a business out there? No, not going to pay storage on that. Just throw it away. And you know what? Everyone does that. Everyone. Thousands of shipping containers every single month arrive at this country full of lithium batteries. And you know what that means? In about 3 to 5 years, thousands of shipping containers of batteries are going right into the landfill. None of that lithium, none of that cobalt is being recycled. We don't have an infrastructure to be able to handle a green economy yet. Now, there are other green economies. For instance, hydroelectric power. It's been around since the turn of the 19th century. Actually, before that, if you want to consider, a mill, turning a millstone with a water wheel, yeah, that's hydraulic power. But hydroelectric, we are turning giant generators by forcing water, gravity-fed, through a dam. And, those generators are big. I've been to the plants where they rebuild the generator. They're 18 to 25 feet in diameter. It's a bunch of magnets. It's a bunch of a wire that has to be, rewound, and the insulators have to be rebuilt. Bearings have to be replaced. And then that generator's sent back to the hydroelectric dam to run for another few years. That's green energy. It's renewable. Every time it rains, it fills up the dam. The dam water goes to a lower level. It makes electricity. And then you have nuclear. Nuclear plant has about a 3.5 to 4 year fuel supply, and then it has to be refueled. It has to be refueled. And that fuel comes from one of two sources. Either you mine the uranium and then enrich it to the point where it's a good heat source, using it to boil water and make steam, or you take the uranium that has already been enriched for weapons and you recycle that. It's much cheaper to take the recycled stuff from the weapons and fuel your plant with it. But the point is that sooner or later we're going to run out of uranium. It's not an endless fuel supply. The key to green energy, in my opinion, is the helium-3, and that is located on the moon. So if we're going to have affordable green energy on this planet, we're going to have to go back to the moon. There's just no two ways about it. It has to be done. And the best time to go is now. It's now. It's only a day and a half away, and all we have to do is build the infrastructure there to begin harvesting the helium-3 that's just sitting there. It's just sitting there in a crater. We don't have to do much. Just core it and use it. I know I make it sound very simple, but trust me, you build me a base on the moon and I'll show you how simple it is. That's the key. That's the key to the future. Read the book, Asteroid Mining, the Future of Energy. This is it. This is how it's done. All right, we have smoked through 2 hours. Our studio, which is the Revolution Radio studio, part of freedomslips.com, has a 2-hour segment for me to broadcast. I take advantage of it every Wednesday night here, probably for about the last 2 years. And we've really appreciated the time slot. And I have it on good authority that Revolution Radio on that time slot is doing very well. It's doing very well. And I'm working hard to make it better. Better sound, a better content, a better look on all the podcasting that we're doing through these 6 different platforms. But it would be nothing without you. Yes, Kenneth Huber, you're right. I have watched the movie Iron Sky. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's a lot of the technology is true, and it's hilarious. It's a really good movie. It's like Sarah Palin type president of Earth, and it's just so funny. You have to see it. But a lot of the technology is true. It's a very interesting movie. Watch it, Iron Sky. Listen, this is X Squared Radio on the America Free Radio Studios somewhere outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. My name is Brooks Agnew, and I've appreciated you being part of the program tonight so much. Now go out and look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day, and before long, you will have saved the planet. So, everything we do will eventually affect the universe. We should do it on purpose. I'll see you Sunday night right here on America Free Radio. Peace, Earth Explorers. Now go and do. And don't forget, don't have any fear, okay? I know that they took the election, and I know that voting doesn't count anymore. But somehow we're going to fix this process, and in 2022, we're going to get our republic back. So you hang in there, and you don't lose faith, and don't resort to violence. All this can be done with love. It can. It can all be done with love. Let them rage if they want to. But stay healthy. Don't wear your mask. Whatever you do, if they require you to wear a mask, walk out unless it's required for where you work. Of course, I want you to earn a living. But, if you have to give up your gym membership, so be it. You have to stop going to that restaurant or that bar, so be it. Let them feel the pain. When they start standing up for their independence, you can stand right next to them. All right? Be good out there. We'll see you.